This is Movies on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about The Eternals, the 26th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Eternals assemble.
Welcome back, fellow defenders, to Movies on TV Podcast Industries. We've been back to the cinema to watch Eternals, the 26th movie in the MCU. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow defenders. I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And hello, Deviants, Eternals, and mere mortals. I am Chris.
Excellent. I like that you didn't classify one or other of those as our wonderful fellow defenders.
You could be any.
Any of them could be offensive.
Yeah.
But we're here to chat about Eternals, yes. Doing it a bit out of order here. We mentioned before that we will be covering Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings when it comes out on Disney+. It's coming out on the 12th of November. That is the 25th movie in the MCU, and The Eternals is the 26th movie. We're doing them the wrong way round, because Eternals came out in the cinema on the 5th of November, the week before Shang-Chi comes out on Disney+. So kind of weird that we're doing them the wrong way round. But we will be talking about Shang-Chi. I promise we'll get to it.
Yes, we will. Yes.
Yes, definitely. Two very different movies.
But we just had a lot on. We've just finished covering Why the Last Man, the 10-episode series on Hulu, and just finished covering What If, Marvel's animated TV show. So loads going on in October, and unfortunately with everything that was going on in the world, we couldn't all get out at the same time to see Shang-Chi in the cinema. So we will be back with that, but we do want to talk in depth about the Eternals. So we've all got to the cinema. Did we all go and see it in IMAX? Myself and John went to see it in IMAX. Chris, did you get to see it in IMAX?
I saw it in Max, which is kind of faux IMAX, but with Dolby Atmos.
Okay.
Kind of, it's the Dolby Vision aspect. And
Yeah,
Atmos.
so it's a smaller screen, but same sound.
Better sound.
Yeah.
Because but it's a slightly smaller screen.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you missed that crucial bit in the corner.
Probably.
I think
it's that slight. It's like, what was that up there in the upper right corner? No, it doesn't matter. Bye.
Like the IMAX screen is so big, and we were kind of at that point in the rows where it was like, are we too close? Where it's kind of like playing tennis during the full thing because you've got to move your head around to see all parts of the screen. Yeah, it was a little just on the border of being able to take the whole screen in one field of view.
Well, the movie opens with a picture of the sun on the right-hand side of the screen. It takes up the entirety of the right-hand side of the screen. And we were sitting on the right-hand side of the cinema itself, looking at the sun, and then suddenly you kind of go, "Oh, sugar! There's something going on the left-hand side. There's a ship arriving from the left-hand side." So you kind of have to move your head to watch it. I love that though.
I actually got a suntan as well.
Yes,
it's so real.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, fellow defenders. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you could subscribe to it by going to tvpodcastindustries.com or anywhere that you subscribe to podcasts. You could just search TV Podcast Industries and find the podcast and keep up with all the stuff that we're covering. If you want to send any feedback to us about any of the movies or TV shows that we cover, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can join us over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, where we have loads of spoiler posts for all the things we're discussing as well. So you can discuss with us and chat about all the spoilery thoughts you may have on the movies and TV shows we cover. I think that's it. Ready to go into our discussion about Eternals, yeah?
Nope. It's much like the film. Let's wait aeons to get to the main story.
Chris may be sharing his thoughts about Eternals.
Oh my goodness, spoilers. But I think we will be getting into our spoiler-filled discussion. Yes. Derek, what are some of the production details?
Well, the movie directed by Chloe Zhao, director of Oscar-winning movie Nomadland. She is also one of the writers on the screenplay. She wrote it alongside Patrick Burleigh, and the screen story was written by Chloe Zhao, Kaz, and Ryan Firpo. The cast for this movie is massive, including Angelina Jolie as Thena, Kit Harington as Black Knight, Richard Madden as Icarus, Gemma Chan as Cersei, Selma Hayek as Ajak, Don Lee as Gilgamesh, Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, Barry Keoghan as Droog, Liam McHugh as Sprite, Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos, and Lauren Ridloff as Makari. John, do you want to tell us what everybody in this team gave us with your synopsis for Eternals?
Sure. In 5000 BC, a group of eternal warriors, Ajak, Icarus, Cersei, Sprite, Thena, Druig, Gilgamesh, Kingo, Makari, and Phastos were sent to Earth by the celestial being Arishem. Their mission is to protect humans from violent deviants, but not to interfere with human progress. Over millennia, they fight this battle and eventually establish a stronghold where they live together in Babylon. Two of the Eternals, Icarus and Circe, fall in love and marry. By 1521, at Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, the Eternals finally defeated the last deviant on Earth. In the aftermath of this victory, Thena is afflicted with Madweri, a disease that releases the memories of all her previous lives. She cannot control her power and attacks the Eternals. Gilgamesh calms Thena and agrees to watch over her instead of wiping her mind. With their mission seemingly complete, their leader, Ajak, releases the rest from their obligations to go out into the world and live lives until Arishem calls upon them. But Druig, who has the power of mind control, is angry that he's not allowed to use these powers to prevent conflict between humans and separates from all the rest. In present-day London, Circe, an eternal teenager sprite, are attacked by a new, more powerful deviant. With the help of Icarus, they drive away the monster and set out to find their leader, Ajak, who has been murdered by the deviant. As Circe stays by Ajak's side, a golden orb passes from Ajak to her, as she is chosen as the new leader of the Eternals. She contacts Arishem, where Circe learns the truth. They were to encourage life on Earth until there was enough to awaken a new celestial, Tiamat. The return of all humans after Thanos' snap has tipped the balance, and Circe needs to reunite the Eternals before the planet they love is destroyed. And that, fellow defenders, is my trip down memory lane of 7,000 years. Woohoo!
And I think that's probably only the first 40 minutes of the movie.
Exactly,
well.
yeah.
So lots going on in here. Lots of brand new characters. Lots of brand new words being introduced within this world. And one of the longest Marvel movies that we've seen in the last couple of years as well.
Yep.
I think Endgame is still the longest Marvel movie that's been released, but this is quite long. We've been getting our money's worth going to the cinema the last couple of months. We went to see Bond, which is 2 hours and 45 minutes. We went to see Dune, which is around the same length, and now we've got Eternals. So they're definitely giving you your money's worth when you go to the cinema, aren't they?
Yeah, and then Spider-Man's is reportedly the same.
The longest ever Spider-Man movie. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the rumor. Do you want to just quickly kick us off with a general idea of the perspective you're coming from? How do you think of the movie? What do you think of the movie, Chris? You kind of already intimated your thoughts about the movie, but just a quick line to sum up what you think of the movie to begin with before we get into our discussion.
Quick sentence is good, not great, strange choices. Interested to see where it goes. How does that sound?
Okay, John, how about yourself?
I came out kind of enjoying the whole thing. I think this has got a lot to do. I think it's probably a unique Marvel movie in terms of what it needs to do and the subject that it's talking about, really. And I came out kind of feeling like I really liked that. I'm not saying it's my favorite Marvel, but it's something different. And I think because of that, it's probably going to sit across a various spectrum of thoughts by most people that are invested in the Marvel universe. And so it's, overall, I thought it was pretty good. Derek, what about yourself?
I came out not sure whether I liked the movie or not, but having sat with it for a few days, I actually think this is a pretty contemplative movie. I think the storyline of it is really complex, and everything that's going on in the movie takes a bit of time to think about and kind of get your head around. But I came out unsure of how I felt about it, but after thinking about it for a few days, putting together the notes and kind of getting a full idea of what the whole storyline is trying to accomplish, I think they did a really good job with this movie. This is something that I'm really looking forward to going to see again in the movie. There was a great spectacle to it. It's a good epic film. And as you say, John, it's trying to accomplish a lot with a storyline with all brand new characters. There's none of these characters that were mentioned before in other movies. And, even the things that connect to the universe that we've seen before are quite complex in their explanations. It's not a simple explanation, for example, why they didn't interfere when Thanos attacked the planet. It's not a simple explanation. We have that dealt with over the course of the film. That kind of stuff I thought was really interesting. So overall, really liked it. They've accomplished a lot with the movie and very intrigued to see how they incorporate these characters in the future.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's get into our main points to talk about in the movie. And I've I've kicked off our first point as Eternals Through History, which is about 6,500 years, I think, if my maths is correct. They arrive 5,000 BC, and I think the battle, which kind of ends that first period, is 1521, so that's 6,500 years. So can we cover that in 1 point, guys?
I guess so.
Sure,
I guess we'll
we can
have
at least attempt.
Yeah.
In the beginning, there was man.
Well, no,
Actually,
Chris.
before that,
In the beginning,
there was
Yes, so the story of the Eternals is that they're sent to Earth by a being called Arasham to protect humans from deviants, which are rising on the planet in 5000 BC. So that's kind of our first moment where we see them arrive on the planet. We do find out later that story is not exactly accurate, but this is the belief that they have when they're coming to the planet. And really interesting opening scene where we have this ancient Mesopotamian society fishing on the beaches, and then suddenly we see an attack from the deviants taking out a human on the beach. Instantly, I realized we were in a bit more of an adult Marvel movie straight away. We have someone getting eaten alive in the opening couple of seconds of this movie. I thought that was quite a surprise. It looks quite brutal. I know we've had brutal moments in Marvel movies, but it felt really instantly brutal at the beginning of this.
Well, he gets his whole head taken off, like, pretty quickly, and it's a dad, and you see the kid kind of going, "Father! Father!" Yes, and then it was beyond that, it was the instant we're in to a fight.
Yeah.
Which is unique. And I say it's unique. It felt unique. It probably isn't. Probably they're actually thinking about it. Age of Ultron did it. Which
I was thinking exactly the same.
Literally, I was like, oh, wait, it's Age of Ultron. Where you get to see everyone gets their own couple of seconds, then you get to see the team as a whole. And I enjoyed this. You get to see all the fighters together, and then all the thinkers come down to, and everyone. It was an interesting way to show everyone's powers.
Absolutely, Chris, totally agree with you. Having these 10 new characters being introduced to the universe, what a great way to kick them off and have a moment where each of them shows you what their powers are. You know, we have Superman beginning, so with Icarus arriving, and obviously Theta coming in directly afterwards, looking like Wonder Woman. That my instant thought was, hey, look, Marvel's doing a DC movie and they're showing you how it should be done. So there's instantly in, everybody battles together and they're all on the same side working together. Really intrigued to see Kingo come in, a character played by Kumail Nanjiani, who's showing that he has finger guns back in 55,000 BC. That was really fun. And then, as you say, Chris, having all the thinkers, having, McCurry coming in and taking everybody out of harm's way, all the humans out of harm's way with their super speed, and then having Phastos come in and show his abilities with technology, then having Drew calm everybody down using his mind control, so you see all of these different aspects of this full team. One other thing I really liked was when they were all brought to life effectively aboard the ship and all given their uniforms effectively. I like how they step forward, look at Earth and look at each other and go, "Hi, my name is Icarus." So they're brand new, effectively reborn as they're coming to this world. I think that was a lovely touch right at the start. It kind of plays out a little bit later on when you realize that they've all had their mind wiped after the last time they had a mission like this. I thought that was kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's that first contact as well, isn't it? It goes or delves into that that tradition of the idea of aliens coming to Earth to imbue knowledge. So is it Graham Hancock or one?
Eric von Daniken.
Yeah, there's a number of authors, and all about sort of like with the pyramids of Egypt and so on and so forth. All this different theories. So that was kind of interesting because ultimately that is this is very much, I guess, to some degree, this is almost the creation element within the Marvel universe to some degree. So I thought that was really cool. I loved how they arrived. I loved that shot of them all silhouetted against the sky with Icarus kind of floating down in between them. Very Superman-like, and of course, quite a few references to the rival comics with Batman and Alfred, as well as Superman, which I thought was quite interesting. I guess I think it's when Makari, there's one point where she is speeding through the world, and there's a very Flash type moment there where she's sort of bounding across the planet's surface. So
you get all really the DC characters in this.
You really do.
You get thematic references or direct references to all the DC.
Definitely,
it is
majors.
The direct references as well. You know, the fact that we've been covering Marvel stuff for 6 years now on our podcast. You know, I remember back in the day on Netflix. You know, and you kind of go, oh, they're watching 24 on TV. Oh, 24 is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and now 10 years into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're referencing Batman, Superman, Clark Kent, Alfred Pennyworth. You know, they're actually saying their names out loud in a Marvel script. That feels really unusual. They're effectively really setting it in our world.
Yeah, even the first contact element, I guess, with Superman coming from an alien world. Yeah. I love the little battle at the start, seeing kind of bits and bobs of everyone's powers. And ultimately this arrival on the coastline in the Middle East, Mesopotamia, that notion, as it's known as the breadbasket of the world in terms of and the cradle of life, where all these innovations that kick-started, I guess, human and technological evolution sort of stem from. Even just that moment with in Babylon and the Hanging Gardens, where it's almost like I think Cersei is showing how to make bread with the grain. That idea of something like bread, and knowing that yeast can prove and leaven it and all this kind of stuff. So this was all really kind of right in my wheelhouse.
Absolutely. John's obsession with Great British Bake Off coming back for the second podcast in a week.
I think I saw a cameo from Paul Hollywood and Mary Berry there. I don't think Prue was there, though. I think, there was an old lady there. Must have been Mary Berry.
Must have been Mary Berry. I love it. But yes, speaking of technology, I love that moment where it kind of comes back to Phastos, who is the technological genius, who's kind of going, well, we could give them this here. It's like a steam engine for them to do their farm work. And they're going, oh no, hang on a second, a bit too much too soon. Yeah. So he turns it back into a standard plow.
I've got a plow. Yeah. There you go. A bit of wood with a sharp edge. Yeah.
But I love all these character moments. This is really early on. We're just going through that first initial setup, and everybody seems to have interesting character moments, which will play off in various ways throughout the movie. But I do like that they all have moments. It doesn't feel like there's a central character that we're following to begin with. Even with having someone as famous as Salma Hayek playing the role of Ajak as the leader of the team, you would expect her to be much more central. But everybody seems to be given their moment in this opening half hour of the film.
Yes, everyone's given their moment. I think the main character is Gemma Chan's Cersei. I think that is. Yeah. I think she is the focal. She is the movie and the audience's center point.
Yes,
she is going to be, I believe, much like she was the Avenger in the comic books, and she was a lot of the comic book readers' introduction to what the Eternals are and who they are, etc. I believe that's what she will be going forward.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's definitely the audience's point of reference here.
Yes.
But I think this is the most ensemble movie that we've gotten, in the sense that, yes, it does focus on her, but it's kind of like the Avengers before they all got their individual, they didn't get their individual movies beforehand. Ultimately, This is them assembling on the spaceship and off doing their collective thing. And the crazy thing about it, though, is that it's not a specific thing that's happening. This is like an epic across time, at least 7,000 years of human history, and their own interactions, and a bit like before, also having to address, why they didn't prevent Thanos and all that. So, like, I think this movie has a lot to do, and I actually think it succeeds in it, really. It's introducing a whole new side of the Marvel Universe with the Celestials, the Eternals, that I guess took, if you think of Guardians of the Galaxy or the space side of Marvel, with Thanos being introduced in Avengers, in the end credits, there's a lot of movies there leading up to Endgame and the Infinity Gauntlet, sort of those last two big movies in the Marvel. This is dumped on us.
Yeah.
There's not been any post-credit hint at Eternals, the Celestials, other than the trailers ultimately. So this is here's a whole side that we haven't mentioned before. Yeah. I mean, even with Doctor Strange, in terms of introducing the magic, that now is, through Thor and through Spider-Man and Endgame and so on, there's been, a number of moments to sort of acclimatize people to that in the MCU. Even though, at least for people that are coming to Marvel from the movies, and which we've been talking about the multiverse, how there's all this warm up with WandaVision and with Loki and with No Way Home, the upcoming Spider-Man, to kind of acclimatize the audience to multiverses. So this is like completely different to that. It's like, here you go. Here's this whole new thing that includes Celestials, Eternals, does this include Galactus? Does this include cosmic entities like Eternity or the Living Tribune? It's kind of like, where do they all fit in? But it's basically the focus on Celestials and Eternals.
Yeah, absolutely. And the entirety of human history.
And the entirety of human history and their own interactions between the Eternals and their interaction with humans. And their view of the planet and the human race, and trying to say, this is why we didn't stop Thanos or Thanos.
and the argument from Chloe Zhao and Kaz and Ryan Firpo, who wrote the central story for Eternals, is that audiences are now becoming so knowledgeable within comic book stories that they didn't want to present the simple bang, bang, pow, pow superhero comic book movie that people expect to see. And that's one thing I will absolutely compliment Kevin Feige's version of the MCU now going into phase 4. They are making more complex films, and it feels like they're willing to go, this doesn't have to be for all the audiences. These are movies that can be made for some audiences. Some people will really enjoy this. Some people may not like it, but it doesn't matter. They're at that point where they don't really mind anymore. Of course they want to make money, don't get me wrong. And they probably limited the budget on something like this to go, this won't make $2 billion like Avengers Endgame made. It may make 700 million, which is a significant profit on the budget that they threw into it. But they don't care. They don't need every person in the world to go out to the cinema. They'd love it, but it feels like they're making movies for different audiences now under the Marvel Studios structure. And this feels very different for that reason.
I'd agree.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
Definitely. I definitely agree. It is the origin story of the, I guess, the massively powerful deities of the Marvel universe in the Celestials. And
you did say this is Eternals Assemble, but this movie does kind of moving into our second point. It is the breakup. It is the Eternals disassembling.
Yeah.
When we get to that battle in Mexico, when we get to that final deviant has been found on the planet, they go to Tenochtitlan. That wasn't too bad, was it?
I think that was pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I had to really kind of focus on how to pronounce the capital of the Aztec world. I guess what you could call it Mexico City. It's present day Mexico City, but yeah.
Do you want to give its real name from Aztec times, from the 1500s? You want to give it its real name because it is the big battle there that ends that society effectively. And I like that they layer in this extra complication. We have Thena, played by Angelina Jolie, losing control of her mind, effectively. She's she's been afflicted by a disease which they call Mad Weary, where effectively her mind breaks and all of her previous iterations, all the other planets that these Eternals have gone to and carried out their plan are all converging together in her mind, and she can't keep them all straight. So she turns on the Eternals and fights against them. This is a really interesting complication to bring into the movie, because I didn't expect that. I thought the Eternals were created to come to Earth to carry out a mission. I didn't realize they'd done this on multiple planets. And while they say they're Eternals, they don't just mean they go on forever from the point they arrive to Earth. They have been also going on forever since before they arrived to Earth.
Yeah, but within the story, this breakup after the battle at Tenochtitlan, there is, I think that's how you pronounce it, but it's we don't know that about Mad Weary. It's an affliction that's come on her, and they know about this, but they don't realize how it connects to Arishem and actually their true purpose, at least for most of the Eternals there. And I think that's the interesting thing. This breakup is not only because of the Mad Weary suffered from Thena, and you have Gilgamesh, who will then stay with her to keep it under control and is able to sort of deal with her outbursts, because Thena is a hugely powerful warrior, it's, warrior class of the Eternals, along with Icarus and Gilgamesh. But we also have, other elements of a breakup here with Druig, played by Barry Keoghan, and we also very soon after have Icarus leaving Cersei, as they basically fell in love and married in Babylon. But they have a breakup, and the whole movie starts. So there's all these little breadcrumbs throughout the movie, because we have at the start about him leaving her for no explanation. So that intrigue builds up as to why has he done that, and ultimately, as we move through the film, it kind of begins to come together. But specifically, then back on Druig, it's this battle at Tenochtitlan is the conquistadors effectively wiping out the Aztecs, and this is where you see Druig saying, well, I could stop this genocide in an instant. And it really is, you see the connections being made by different Eternals to this world that effectively up till now they've lived on for about 6,000 years. And these connections that they've made, we see Cersei has that also, that kind of deep love of the people of this planet as well.
Have to say, this moment from Barry Keoghan, when he kind of releases the anger that's within him after 6,000 years of being told, do not interfere with humans and don't control their minds to stop them from fighting. That moment when he just releases it and says, this could all be averted. We didn't need to have them all die in war. It's such a great performance. We've just finished covering Y: The Last Man, and he was the original actor cast in the role of Yarick in that series. I can't see him in that role now after seeing him as Druig. He's a fantastic actor, but I just couldn't see him doing Yarick. The way that Ben Schneitzer did on that show. I think Ben Schneitzer is the perfect Yarick. I think Barry Keoghan plays this character of Druig really well. It's so different from the stuff I've seen him in before. But that moment of emotion that's coming out of him, where, as you say, all of the Eternals have made those connections with humans across the time they're on the planet, but his deep sorrow, effectively, that he couldn't prevent all of these deaths, couldn't help all of the humans just to move along and get along effectively.
When he has the powers to be able to do it.
I think it comes across really, really well. Loved it.
I really enjoyed this because you get to see the emotion so much across all of their faces. As Ajax is like, all right, go. You see Gilgamesh, I'll stay with Thena and I'll look after her throughout the ages. Finding out that Druig kept the Aztecs going for 20 generations, and he's maintained and looked after that. All the people he took with him for 20 generations has led to that camp, and has stayed in the Amazon in that camp with him. So it's amazing to see that. That because you think he is the big bad to
That's
a degree.
what I was going to say. It's one of those ones in comic books. Druig is very much he's got the black goatee, looks like the bad guy from the minute you see him, and the power to manipulate minds in itself is generally treated as a negative power so much. And I think even before we went into the cinema, we saw the poster with all of the Eternals up on the poster, and John was going, well, there's Barry Keoghan in his first villain role. So I love that it's not a villainous position that he's taking. He's just going against the mission of the Eternals, and totally understandable why. Of course, if they're going to be on the planet surrounded by these people, they're going to fall in love with them and want to take care of them and want to protect them, and don't understand why you're in a battle and you can save them from deviants, but you can't stop them from fighting with each other, you know?
Yeah, and it's almost not about good and evil. It's about the perception of whether you're being perceived as being righteous or unrighteous here. But ultimately, I think what it comes down to, because, like we discussed, just before the podcast, it's that notion that actually it's almost like a religion. It's the faith that the Eternals have in Arisham's plan. And it's whether you're unquestioning or questioning about that. It's the righteous belief to maintain with that plan despite new evidence, or whether you're perceived as being unrighteous because you've changed because of your experience and your just the being embedded in and on the planet. And those experiences over 6,500 years has changed your viewpoint of it. And of course, that scales up into a very different thing about the purity of the mission, when that becomes revealed, later on.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing. This circumvented a few things for me, because as you say, I looked at, Druig in the posters and was like, there we go, evil guy, slightly aloof, standing off, arms crossed, closed book, in black. Everyone else kind of more gold and color. And actually, it circumvents a number of those different things of my tiny, fragile little mind, I guess.
And it's more just that he's put out because he can't use his powers to help people effectively. And that's the moment when they all break up and separate. And it is kind of interesting that, you know, having lived 6,500 years together, most of them don't see each other again, really, from that point until present day. It is just Cersei and her husband Icarus that go off and live together for a couple of 100 years more, and then that's it. That's the end of their relationship. So those two go off together. Athena being taken care of by Gilgamesh, they go off and live together, and everybody else seems quite separate.
Sprite's with Ajax.
Yeah.
Sprite is with Ajax.
Stays with the leader.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
then we also find out that Makari, while by herself, was also off seeing Druig throughout the ages as well. So there has been, so what we find, while separate, a lot of them, they've stayed somewhat in contact.
But having all lived together pretty much as one unit for the 6,500 years they've been on the planet, they're all kind of separated from then on and don't come together as a team.
Well, it's at that moment, the mission that's finished is that all the deviants that are killing humans have been wiped out, as far as they can tell. Or so they believe, exactly.
Yeah, because that leads on to our kind of central action beat, I suppose, which is our third point, the return of the deviants. So in present day, and I don't know why they don't give the date. We're somewhere around 2024 now. Is that right? In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because of the 5-year time jump in Endgame, it's around 2023, 2024 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I think it's 2024 going on to 2025.
Because
well, depending on what month it is, but it looks like winter, so late 2024, early 2025.
Yeah, something around there, and it is post the return of all of the humans that were snapped away by Thanos. But we have Cersei and her new boyfriend, Dane Whitman, played by Kit Harington, in London, going out and having a good old session, a good old drinking session in London.
Yeah.
With Sprite. And we kind of see a little bit of Sprite's character here. Sprite being a teenager since she arrived on the planet, or a very young teenager, actually, since she arrived on the planet, that has now spent 7,000 years in a teenage body, unable to get into relationships like Cersei has. And you can see the jealousy of Sprite. You can see her right at the start. Her introduction is that she is putting on a glamour that she's older than she is, and then takes off the glamour to leave the bar effectively. But because she has to go home for her bedtime, must be really, really irritating. Imagine spending 6,500 years as a teenager, or 7,500 years at this stage as a teenager. Can you imagine?
Yeah, well, it's physical, and I guess that's the thing, is that for everyone, all the humans looking on, she is that teenager, but she is hugely sort of grown up like she's the storyteller, I kind of, in that sense, can do the glamour and that kind of element to it.
Absolutely. To see the little nods, you mentioned about the storyteller, a couple of little nods to Sprite and what she's done over history, things like, effectively, I think they kind of say that Thena is what gave the world the Amazons and the idea of the Amazon race and Wonder Woman, effectively. They kind of mention that Icarus, the story of Icarus that's in mythology, is from a story that Sprite told at that time. Also, I think the inference is that he's the inspiration for Superman too, which I think is a nice little dig at DC. We had Icarus; he's been around for a couple of thousand years. Lasers coming out of his eyes, alien from another planet. Did Sprite tell that story to the writers of Superman? I like that little touch that she's the storyteller that could have created a lot of the myths that we know today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get these huge we get a lot of hints and nods. So if you look at the end credits, you see Sprite talking to, like, Houdini. Sprite's talking to all these masters of illusion, talking to storytellers. In the comic books, Sprite is Puck from Midsummer Night, and talking to William Shakespeare, she's the muse for a lot of these great storytellers throughout history. So it's kind of hinted at on a lot of this, but then, like, with Peter Pan, it being talked about in the comic books, she is hinted at being Peter Pan because, Sprite in the comic books is a boy. So in the comic book, Sprite is Peter Pan.
I think, like, in Neil Gaiman's version of the story, he's a child star on TV, and it's kind of one of those ones that he's been on TV for about 6 or 7 years, and people are kind of starting to wonder why he's staying so young. It's that kind of little twist on it. So they do have that incorporated in the movie with Kingo's character being a Bollywood star for about 100 years. He's his great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, his grandfather, and himself all starring in Bollywood movies from the beginning, effectively. So,
the greatest dynasty ever in Bollywood.
Yeah.
Really like that. But overall, how about the attack itself on London? Like, we did see battles throughout the ages, but the attack itself on London, where we have this kind of more powerful deviant attacking Cersei and Sprite, and Dane hanging in the background going, what the heck is going on? Because he has no idea who these people are.
Again, it's really fun to see them, because Cersei and Sprite are not the fighters you have the two groups of the Eternals, fighters and thinkers, or manipulators. Seeing how they use their powers is always fun.
Yeah.
Because, like, seeing Cersei turn the bus into petals.
Yeah.
And then the driver kind of getting out of the group going, What just happened?
Absolutely. I was kind of wondering, is there a London bus at that time of night that wouldn't have anybody other than the driver on it? Did she turn everybody else on board into petals except for the driver? I was kind of worried about that.
She can't change organic.
That's true. That is very true.
But then you see Sprite with all the different, the illusions, the glamour of herself.
I love that. I love them all going in different directions. That was really cool.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it was really, really cool. It felt like with Doctor Strange doing that to Thanos on Titan.
Yeah.
And the butterflies with the petals. So I guess there's but this is really cool. I love the attack on London. You see kind of almost like the shark fin of the deviant on the canal. And then the big fight. But this deviant seems to have evolved in the sense that it can actually mend itself. Now they're pretty powerful. It takes quite a lot we see in that initial big fight in Mesopotamia, that it takes a lot of attacks from the Eternals to kill them, and it certainly needs a kind of a bit like a zombie, the head taken off, really, to sort them out.
You're right, because I like Icarus got injured in that initial attack, and he looked all powerful when he's going after the deviant, but coming back afterwards, and he does have cuts and bruises.
Yeah, and we
from it.
see Ajax healing him.
Yeah.
So this was really good. And then seeing Icarus come in to kind of, again, to using his laser eyes or his energy eyes was very cool. I have to say, I did absolutely love the whole Game of Thrones meeting, I guess, of Icarus and Dane Whitman
This
with
is written in the notes here as an extra little point. Go, John.
Yeah, no, I love that we get Robb Stark and Jon Snow meeting again, and of course, Dane Whitman is in black with reference to his Black Knight and the Night's Watch. So this was all really nice. Even just having Cersei as well, that with Richard Madden effectively falling in love with Cersei here as Icarus again.
Richard Madden and Kit Harington both falling in love with
Well,
Cersei.
that's true,
Which is a
yes.
major character in Game of Thrones. If you haven't watched it, Cersei is probably one of the most evil
Definitely,
bad guys
yeah, absolutely.
in Game of Thrones. But
So
just to mention, formerly of this parish, as we say, Jason Kabasi, who co-hosted one of our shows, he did point out that the last line said by Robb Stark to his brother Jon Snow when Jon Snow is going off to the Night Watch is, "Next time I see you, you'll be all in black." And we do have the Black Knight in this movie coming back and meeting up with Robb Stark. So a nice little touch. I'm sure they all were on set going, "This will be hilarious." I'm sure they all knew it's not a coincidence that was the case.
A fun one as well. Gemma Chan, who plays Cersei, is also a curator teacher in the National Museum of Antiquities. In Sherlock Holmes Season 1, Episode 2, she is a curator in the National Museum of Antiquities with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Very good. Yeah. Sherlock is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now. It's taking everything. Everything's
involved.
Yeah.
And actually, that most of the people in that, because Martin Freeman, you have Benedict Cumberbatch, and you have Gemma Chan. All of them in the Marvel Universe. So at some point, we may get a Sherlock Holmes kind of reunion at that point.
Absolutely.
That would be great to get Moriarty in there as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Quick one as well. This one, for anyone who's read the Neil Gaiman Eternals, there is a nice little Easter egg. As the Deviant is coming out of the River Thames, there is a homeless man with his dog, is a character from the comic books called Zurus, who is one of the main leaders of the Eternals at that point in the comic books, and is a homeless man for a while and has a pet dog. And essentially, this is literally it's the same thing. Old homeless man in London with a dog, and you see the Deviant. So nice little kind of nod.
And so then he's like Ajax here, that he's the person that can communicate with the Celestial, with Arishem in this case. Because it's just Ajax is the only one that
can talk to Celestials.
Which I have to say was done really cool as well. I loved her going to Arishem. I thought that was pretty cool.
Absolutely, yeah. They kind of, the people who can communicate with Celestials kind of change depending on comic books. It's not just one
it's not
person,
fixed,
but one Celestial kind of pairs with one of the Eternals that they can speak to, or will only speak to one Eternal.
Yeah, and that's the golden orb, effectively, that passes to Cersei, at least in the movie.
In the movie, yes, it is just that Ajax is the leader. She's the one that talks to the Celestial, and then that orb passes between her.
It's like the mobile phone, I guess, of Eternals and Celestials.
Basically, but it's more like the can on the end of a rope, because only that particular can can connect to the Celestial. But that's effectively what happens after this attack in London. They go to find out that Ajax has been murdered, which I was really shocked by, given that we'd seen the trailer and seen loads of Salma Hayek in present day.
Yeah.
And I was going, okay, she's dead. How the heck do we get all the rest of those scenes where she explains what's going on to Icarus and that kind of stuff? So I like that she comes back later on, of course, in the movie, but it was a real surprise to see her dead. I just kept going, why don't they pick up her body and bring it inside? Was my instant moment where they were all looking at the dead body of Ajax on the ground, and then they're sitting inside. We see Sprite having a memory of Ajax where she's kind of playing up the last moment they were together, which again maybe think, oh, she's alive. Of course, this is just, there's no way an Eternal can be killed effectively. But that's how the Deviants are getting more power. They're killing Eternals now and taking their powers from them. So we see that main, Deviant that we saw in London. We see that Deviant a couple of times more. That's Crow, who has now become a more powerful Deviant and is eventually going to start looking more, human-like, I suppose, by the end of the movie as he takes more and more powers.
And it's where we then see this orb move into Cersei as well, as she is kind of made leader. It's almost, it's intimated that Ajak has chosen her to replace her if she ever dies, at some point, because, and as it plays out, because of her affinity and her empathy with the human race, and that a lot of people thought that it would have been, Icarus. As her right-hand man, effectively.
So this is the one I'm not sure whether I fully understand. So Ajak has been the leader of the Eternals and she is aware of the plan.
Yes.
So she knows exactly what's going to happen, that they're all there to get the human race up to a certain level, and that when it gets up to that level, a new celestial will rise, killing the entire planet.
Yes.
She tells Icarus this, and Icarus kind of loses it a bit. But
runs away because he'll end up telling people he doesn't want to lie to them, so he goes off by himself and runs away from Cersei.
And he specifically he leaves Cersei, and that's the reason, is because he knows how much she cares for the human race. Yeah. And he now knows the plan, the long-term plan, because it is to that point where they leave from and they separate. And it's, they'll wait for Arishem to contact there's that period of 500 years or so where it's like, well, what are we doing in a sense from the Celestials, and only Ajax and I guess soon after that Icarus know that they're waiting for the population size to be of a certain level where they're used effectively as an energy source to create a new celestial in the form of Tiamat.
Well, to raise the new
celestial. To raise it, yeah.
So that's my question. Why then is it Cersei that's chosen as leader? Because Cersei will protect the planet from the rise of the new celestial, because she has so much love for the planet. I would have expected that it would have been Icarus, because Ajak knew what was going to happen. So
Ajak changes her mind.
Yeah, Ajak changes her mind.
That's what I'm trying to work out.
That's the moment in kind of flashback. We see it in the trailer where she's telling Icarus about, with the snapback of all the human race with the defeat of Thanos, that all these humans, half the population of the world has returned. Effectively, Thanos effectively put on hold the creation of the Celestial by taking out half the population, and that now it's time. And so in that flashback, she says to Icarus, and in the movie then it expands to say that, in that time since the Aztec Empire, where they were, she has also come to care a lot for the human race and what they've achieved and how they've progressed and so on. And this is where then, again, another little sort of pull of the rug for me, that we see Icarus betraying her on the basis that he's still got the purity of the mission and the righteousness of this mission.
Yeah.
So as to Chris says, she ultimately has second thoughts, I guess, and ultimately decides that she doesn't want to see this mission fulfilled either.
Yeah. So this is where the complexity always comes in, with flashbacks and things being revealed out of order, I suppose, for me. This is where it came in the movie. So she revealed it to Icarus somewhere around 1700 or 1800, a couple of 100 years after the whole team split. She revealed to Icarus the plan. That's when he left Cersei, or very soon after that. He left Cersei because he couldn't lie to her.
Yeah.
And then Ajak calls Icarus back to her about 8 days before the attack on London to say, the world has been returned to a point now that it is ready for the arrival of the Celestial, but we need to stop it. And Icarus tells her, actually, there are deviants already available, and pushes her over and kills her effectively.
Yeah.
So because he wants to follow the mission, she wants to get all the Eternals back together to protect the Earth now, because she's now on the side of protecting Earth against everything. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Cersei ultimately then takes on the revised mission for the Eternals that Ajak was planning on doing by then, after she's learnt the truth from Arishem, that effectively this planet will be destroyed with the birth of a new Celestial. And so that leads to then the reuniting of the Eternals.
Absolutely. We haven't really talked about the visuals of the movie, but I have to say those moments with Arishem and with an Eternal, whichever one it is that speaks to him on Earth, going and seeing this Celestial being out in the universe, that they're directly taken from Jack Kirby's run from the 70s. They really do feel that epic, really unusual outside of anything that we've seen before. It doesn't feel like something that could just sit directly into a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. There's a real style to those scenes, and they do look absolutely fabulous.
It's beautiful. I must say, I think the visual look of the movie, the design, and it is gorgeous. And I think even just the that close up of the Celestials, but even at the end where Arishem sort of, peers over the planet Earth, it felt very Death Star-y from Rogue One, where you see the Death Star appearing through the haze of the atmosphere. So you get that, it's slightly kind of foggy look to it, I guess, but it was just really very, very cool. I thought that was really nicely done.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of said that this is the halfway point of the movie, and we have obviously talked a lot about the history of the Eternals. Let's talk about the reuniting of the Eternals, because there are lots of stories of what's been going on with each of the teams since they broke up, I suppose. Already mentioned, really, Kingo has been starring in Bollywood movies. He now has his valet or filmographer Karun, who has been with him for 50 years. I really like this character of Karum. I think he's quite fun, having him trying to film everything that's going on to make this documentary that Kingo wants to make. Yeah. But there's also just a lovely touch within this character. I know he's a bit of the comic relief for the movie, but I think there's a lovely touch with him effectively not wanting to leave this movie that he's working on, because it's not that he's obsessed with fame or anything like that. It's that he's set up this entire studio system which has so many people dependent on him, and he doesn't want to let all those people down. There is that love inside him, like with many of the other Eternals, for the humans they've interacted with, and it comes across really well in that moment when they all say, no, you need to go and take care of this. Karun tells him he needs to go off and do the mission that he's here for. They'll all be fine without him, kind of thing. But I do think this idea that he's built up his own community around him is really special to Kingo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have to say I enjoy Kingo a lot in this. I also really enjoyed Karun. Yes, and Karun is, as you said, comic relief. But there's even just a small part of him which is he consistently thanks the Eternals for everything they've done throughout the film. It's like, no, I want to be here with you guys. Like, you guys have continuously saved the world or saved humans, or blah blah blah. That show of humanity is really good throughout the film, and I really do. And
it's really important, I think, to have in there. And so I think it's really it's props to Chloe Zhao that perspective is there from Karun. I really like this dynamic as well. I just thought it was really it was just another perspective, another sort of iteration on in effect, Kingo falls halfway house to some extent between, say, what Cersei has and what Icarus ultimately has, which is that, theologically, so to speak, I guess, or mission-wise, he's still on the page of Icarus around the aims, but he has created this whole community around him. And he has that affection for Karun and all the people there in the same way that Cersei has, and effectively, removes himself from that final battle, because actually he can't really come down on any side of that, because in some ways he agrees with both. in that sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's really interesting about it.
What did you think of this overall kind of, just before we get into the fight? There's basically, we can just talk before we get into the fight at the compound. I just want to see what you thought of, like, bringing what Druig's been up to. What do you think of Fastos? What do you think of Makkari? How they've reintroduced all those characters?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think Fastos is probably my favorite story of the background characters. I suppose he does have less screen time than, as you mentioned before, Chris, the major characters of Cersei and Icarus. But his story of someone that's trying to advance the pace of human development with technology that he can provide to them. This idea that if we had aliens come down from another world that was more advanced than us, they could cure everything. And that seems to be where Fastos is coming from at the beginning. He's, saying he wants to bring the steam engine to the planet 2,000 years before we had any other form of technological development. That was his plan all along, was what could I do to aid the development of human society. And I love that we have that flashback moment to him in 1945 when the bomb is dropped on Hiroshima and he's standing in the wake of it, realizing what the humans have done with the possibilities of the technology he could have provided, and just losing all faith in humanity. I think that's a beautifully shot scene. It's a beautiful moment for a person that had so much belief in the human race to be so distraught by them. And that's why he's cut himself off from everybody and unwilling to come back to the Eternals until he finds his husband and has a child, which brings him back to the love of the human race, realizing there's another side of humanity. It's not everybody in the world, every human in the world that would have created an atom bomb and dropped it on other humans. There are other good things about humanity. I love that storyline. It's played quite well in just the few minutes it's given on screen.
Yeah, I think it's really concise storytelling. I mean, in some ways, in his own way, Fastos gets Druig's moment from 1512, but in 1945, where he has that moment to retreat from everything. And he does that on the basis of, him bringing technology to the humans to make them progress, in positive ways. And it's taken for the development of weaponry, and in this sense, real mass, weaponry with capabilities to wipe out entire cities. I mean, it's interesting because ultimately in the Aztec moment, you see the conquistadors with muskets and very much more advanced compared to the Aztecs. And so even at that moment, I guess maybe he has that inkling and he just sees how far it goes. I mean, we don't see that storyline, but that's the way I kind of thought about it. Was he sees where the technology that he's introduced, not necessarily that he introduced the musket, but gunpowder, the idea of explosion, has been utilized. And you have that conversation of Druig, where why did we advance or this part of the world more than others? Because that was it was like the meeting of aliens, ultimately, on Earth with conquistadors and Aztecs. Very similar stages of civilization, but with very different technologies, ultimately, and very different practices and cultures. And it sort of moves through where he sort of, retreats from it all in the same way that Druig does. So I see a lot of commonality there for very different reasons. But I think then seeing how he comes back to connecting with this planet that he's on through his husband, Ben, and the love of Ben and their son, Jack. And I thought that representation was really good, actually. It felt very, very natural. It felt very, very unforced. And I thought that was just great.
Absolutely. Actually. I think I was sitting in the cinema with Savage John, obviously, being in a gay couple, seeing gay characters on screen, and I was absolutely going, they're going to do the Marvel swerve. They're going to have Brian Tyree Henry going, I'm a gay man with a husband. They won't really interact. They'll talk to each other from the opposite side of a room, basically. They'll have, representation they'll say all these things in the script, but no actual representation on screen. I am so happy they had a moment where two husbands are standing side by side with each other, one sending the other off to a battle, giving each other a kiss and sending them off like they do with every other kind of couple that you would have in this universe. And it annoys me that we got so happy earlier on this year when we had Loki saying potentially he might possibly have been bisexual at some point in the past. And we were so happy with that being the kind of representation that was being brought to the MCU. Now we actually have proper representation in this movie. I'm so happy to see it on screen. It was really good. Really well done.
It's played so naturally, but matter of factly. And that's the great thing about it. That's the power around that.
Yeah, there was no fanfare. It wasn't like this huge thing. Look, we've got a gay couple. Oh my God, check this. Look, we're great. Like, it was just, it was.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with a lot of this film. And again, before we get, there's different couples, ethnicities, races, religions, sexuality. Everything is in this. Mm-hmm. It is a melting pot of a film, and it's all played matter of fact.
Absolutely.
There's just, like, even Macari being deaf.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, that's a new thing for the film. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. It's just based on that because she goes so fast, her eardrums ruptured because of the sonic booms. Mm. And that's why they are deaf. And it's just ASL, I think they're speaking, American Sign Language in a lot of it, which is slightly weird, but sure. Should be like their own one, but no. And it's just, it's all very nice. And like everything is just matter of fact.
Absolutely. And you shows how much the media has attacked all of this stuff before the movies come out. The review bombing that's been going on Rotten Tomatoes, the news stories about Marvel has the first ever gay couple 2.5 years before the movie came out. The movie comes out, this scene happens, and it's totally dealt with as exactly how any other couple would be dealt with in the movie. I love that when you sit down and watch the movie and give the movie its due for what it's presenting for you, it isn't making, as you say, Chris, a fanfare out of every single character that's on screen. Everybody's being dealt with exactly the same way as Steve Rogers being the character he is was dealt with, or Tony Stark, the character he is being dealt with. None of it is fanfare, look over here, look at what we're doing, except how it's being dealt with in the press.
Yeah. Well, interesting enough, as of essentially release date, which was the 5th, they said they're not making any edits to the film. So there's a lot of kind of like, it may not release in the Middle East. It's not going to release in China because of Chloe Zhao. So like there's definitely, there's a few places that they're sticking to their guns. There's no fanfare, but they're sticking to their guns that this is an important thing.
Absolutely,
and they haven't made.
They should be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like the constant attack that Marvel has had for many years and Disney has had for many years, that they pander to audiences by toning down their language, by toning down their descriptions of things, and by toning down what they show on screen. So if they were to do that again with a movie like this and pull out scenes just to appease the market and get the money from them, it would just make a mockery of what they're trying to create as the new version of Marvel Studios under Kevin Feige. A lot of that stuff that they did in the past was under Ike Perlmutter and on the Marvel side and on the Disney side. So now that he's gone, I'm glad that they're making these movies and not willing to make changes just for individual countries. If they don't want to watch them, that's absolutely fine. No reason for them to be released over there.
Yeah.
How about some of the other characters? I know a big other storyline that I think works really well in the movie. We have Thena and Gilgamesh, this idea that Thena has had this break in her mind. I think it's dealt with really well. It feels really like dementia that the character's going through, that she sometimes forgets where she is. There's even that conversation with Phastos' son Jack later on, that she kind of forgets what's going on and doesn't know exactly what situation she's in. She's got to focus really hard to keep her mind together effectively. I think this is a lovely relationship that they have between Gilgamesh and Thena. It's not stated out loud that there's anything other than a friendship between the two of them, but the fact that he's willing to spend eternity, however long that may be, protecting her and making sure she's safe, rather than wiping what Thena was in the past and wiping all of those memories out of her, I think is a lovely relationship between the two of them.
Agreed. I think just throughout the film, and even into later on with some of the fights and the sacrifices, it's just played beautifully. And the stay here, the hand, very Hulk, Black Widow, in terms of that part. And then just how that plays out later on with Thena's character is fantastic.
It's literally in the next kind of bit we need to talk about it, which is Droog and where he's based. They have Droog has his commune, as you mentioned, Chris. This is a commune built from the Aztec society, which he's kept alive for generations after that initial battle. And they all converge there to meet Droog, and we have the deviant attack. Which I know, John, you were
I
really
love this. I thought this was the most atmospheric. For me, it had these scenes, this forest fight, were some of the best shots and visuals from the trailer. And I love the action here. I mean, I really like the action across all of this. I mean, it feels to me, rather than it being an action adventure, it's more like a drama adventure with really good action, or a drama adventure action movie, I guess. It was just really nicely balanced from that for me. And I loved this forest fight. I thought it was really atmospheric, just under sort of almost the dusk created by the forest. But you see that moment where one of the deviants is coming down the tree trunk, stops as the blacksmith is hammering away. And I guess, was it drawn out too long by Chloe? I don't think so. I was just there going, okay, when's it going to happen? Because it really just sort of drew it out so much. And then
I totally agree. Any other director of any Marvel movie would have had that blacksmith taken out.
Yeah, exactly. And
that would be the first attack, and then they maybe find his body, and then that extends the scene. What Chloe Zhao has done here, just having the shadows in the background, and if you happen to see them, then you're waiting for the attack. If you don't happen to see them, if you just miss that shadow in the background, you're not expecting an attack. But from that moment, if you have seen it, you're kind of waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't need an attack to make you as on the edge of your seat for the attack, or me anyway.
Yeah, and you have, I mean, I think the Icarus fights are just spectacular, flying up through the canopy in the air, but also where, the power deviant manages to crush his head down, and he's fighting this, and it ultimately requires someone to come and help. To get him out of that bind. I just thought all these were just really good visuals. Now, I love the moment where Droog's got all the people sort of just firing the weapon, at all the guns at one of the deviants. Here we see a new, power effectively of Cersei, where she is able, so effectively her power is she can change the material nature of all inert materials, but she can't do living or organic. She can't change organics effectively. And here we see her creating a tree out of one of the deviants when she's kind of been forced into a pond, and is fighting to save her life really from this deviant attack. So, but I love the moment where she sort of just puts part of the tree into water, changes the rest of it to effectively silver or sort of some kind of metallic, and to cage the deviant. And then you have Druig coming in with all his, all the people from the camp, and they're just firing sort of in sync. That was really, really cool.
It must have taken that's something I want to see in the making of it. Just the choreography of getting that many people to do the exact same movement at the same time. That was really cool.
Yeah. And also this is where we get to see the more kind of human form of this deviant as he absorbs and ultimately kills Gilgamesh, to become Crow.
Yeah. Gilgamesh sacrificing himself to save, well, the rest of the Eternals, but mostly Thena, so that she can't go. I think it's again, puts that cap on the arc, as you mentioned, Chris. It's that kind of ending of the arc that he's been protecting for this many centuries and is willing to give up his life to save her, but unfortunately makes the deviant even more powerful by giving him his powers.
Yeah. And for me, I'm right there with you guys. This, for me, was one of the better fight scenes. It was, you got to see, again, everyone's used to their powers. It was capped with an emotional ending. When you have Thena and you're constantly told of how much of a warrior she is, a fierce warrior, and essentially she is hamstrung. So they
Yeah.
basically, as the Eternals as a team, are basically they have their Achilles heels that Athena can turn, and she does turn multiple times, and they're fighting her while trying to calm her down, and then fighting the Deviants. So it's a fun thing to watch and see, and then it's just this emotional arc. Now it's the up that Druig joins them and releases the people, and then the down that Gilgamesh is dead, and
Yeah.
Athena is still, and there's like, what do we do next? Let's go get Phastos. Let's move forward. Let's figure it all out. The ending there, where they then all come back together to go to get Domo, their ship, is just, for me, was beautiful, because they go to the site of the Hanging Gardens of
Yeah,
Babylon,
yeah.
and it's always been there, and it's just under. And as the Domo rises, you see the city of Babylon underneath
Yeah,
it.
that was
And I was
cool.
like, that's nice. Well done.
Yeah.
This has been like encased under. And then you get to see Makari again, and she's been living there for the whole time by herself, just speed reading away.
It's really interesting.
after-
It's like as if she didn't get the message. From Ajax says, go out, make lives for yourself in the world, and then come back and tell me what you've learnt, basically, whenever the next message comes in. And it's like Makari's kind of going, yeah, but we've accomplished our mission. Now it's time to go home, and just goes and sits on this ship, getting as much information as she possibly can about the world. So she's learned through reading and learned through artworks and learned through various artifacts that she's gathered together, because she can go in and out, I suppose, of the ship. But it seems like she's just been sitting there learning for 2,000 years, effectively.
And searching for the Emerald Tablet. What is the Emerald Tablet?
We will find out in a future movie when the Eternals return, Chris.
Oh my god.
I know. I hope so.
I hope so. I hope this is not a thread that just drops, because I was like, you've mentioned it twice now, and it's found, and this, like, we've seen it. I'm like, I literally, I did a bit of quick. I'm like, there's a lot of Emerald things in the Marvel comic universe, and there's a lot of tablets in the comic universe. So I'm like, it could be a mishmash of anything. It could be nothing. But they pointed out so many times. I'm like, oh god, like, what? You should please just tell me next time.
And I thought it was just something to do with how they were creating the Unimind. I thought it was some basic plan that Phastos was using to create the Unimind, because it was so important to, as you say, mentioning it out loud over and over again. And when they go and meet Makari, who's the last member of the crew to get together, she's got the tablet right there. You see Drew pick it up and going and giving her a kiss and saying, thank you, of course you'd have it, kind of thing. So I just assumed that there would be a connection to the final plan. So I guess there wasn't. I guess there was no line there connecting the two things.
Yeah.
Because she was stealing from the humans back in the days of Babylon to find this Emerald Tablet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what else could it be? Like, it's going to be like, it's connected to like the Darkhold or the sorcery elements or something like that. Yeah. It is going to be like part of the new, like, Book of Chthon or the Darkhold. It's going to pop up in multiple places.
It was even we see Excalibur, Arthur's sword, and I'm just wondering, will that connect in with the Black Knight's ebony blade as well? Yeah. Which would be really cool. I mean, it almost feels, the medieval elements of the Marvel universe also introduced here in that sense.
So it's Sprite saying to Athena, "Is that the ebony blade?" And it's then, no, it's Excalibur.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, Merlin was always a funny one. So Excalibur is one of the main weapons outside of the amulet for Captain Britain. Captain Britain is in, or was in, both Excalibur the team, but also MI3, which is this secret kind of sorcery group led by Captain Britain, which had the Black Knight in it, but also Blade. Because... Yes. MI3, along with Black Knight, Blade, and Captain Britain, are this big sorcery ones and used to fight lots and lots of vampires. Yeah. I think Excalibur, Captain Britain, and a few others might turn up in Blade because...
But no, we do have Captain Britain from What If. We have
yes, exactly.
Captain Carter. So.
And we also, as well, the current... the run of Doctor Strange and the Sorcerers Supreme... also had Merlin in as well.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
So, did you ever think, when talking about Marvel on Marvel in movies, especially getting to effectively a space opera that is the Eternals, that would be talking about medieval times, talking about vampires, talking about people like Merlin and a Blade getting together in a team up? This universe can go anywhere, really, can't it?
It really can.
Yeah.
And because the whole thing is they're pulling from multiple comic book runs, and they're twisting and turning and everything, it could go anywhere. Because, say, even this film, where they had 2 or 3 good versions, they just mashed multiple bits and elements and took bits and things from multiple things and put them all together to make their own amalgam version. And I'm like, yeah, you could go anywhere with this. There could be a purely, the Excalibur, which was a mutant team, is now just purely non-mutant, English-based kind of team fighting vampires. Yeah. There you go.
But that's not new for the MCU either at all. That this is what the MCU has always done, is taken bits of comic books. But it's also not new for comic books. Like, you couldn't really read Neil Gaiman's version of the Eternals as a direct translation or a direct follow-up to Jack Kirby's Eternals. He was taking elements of it and twisting them and changing them for the present world that he was writing it at that time.
Yeah.
And there's been another version of the Eternals which is much more recent. There's been 2 other versions of the Eternals which are
Kieran
much more recent.
Gillian's another Irishman.
Yeah, Kieran Gillen's is the most recent run, but there's one in between the 2 that has another change to the story, another change to the Eternals and their motivations. These are characters that are smaller characters in the Marvel Universe and do get changed quite a lot in this world. So the MCU making their own change to their motivations and who's the villainous one, I suppose, or who turns on the team is very much in keeping with the history of the Eternals.
Oh, yeah.
Like, speaking of who turns on the team here, our final battle, really, stopping of the rise of the Celestial. I like that there are people that turn on them, and I like that Cersei, I think, makes the statement at the end that everybody's just going with what they believe. And there's nothing wrong with that. She's not holding anything against Icarus and Sprite by the end of this massive battle because they've gone against the team. They were just going with what their beliefs were and what they felt was the right way to deal with what was going on.
Yeah.
Icarus has known about this for many years, and his plan was always to release the Celestial on the planet, effectively.
Yeah.
And then Sprite sides with him because Sprite's in love with Icarus and has been for 6,000 years.
Yeah.
But a bit of a shocker.
Yes.
That's Sprite.
Well,
turned
sorry.
on Cersei.
Oh, Sprite, no. Because you kind of, from the Peter Pan moment, it is kind of said that there's a love there. So, not really there. Icarus is the one. This is partially the one. I enjoy the betrayal. I enjoy the character. Like you said, usually it's Druig. Druig is usually the bad guy. He is the evil Eternal, essentially, in the comic books. In Neil Gaiman's run and some of the later ones.
He separates himself from the Eternals for his own gain, for the most part. He actually tries not to go up against the Eternals because they're all as powerful as him. He's I think there's one where he signs a treaty where he's given an entire state to himself, where he sets it up like Doctor Doom, effectively, in Latveria. He sets up his own state, and the agreement that he has with the Eternals is, you don't interfere with whatever I'm doing. And I won't come anywhere near you, basically. So Druig is a villain, but is almost a villain to other people, not to the Eternals. He's just a part of the Eternals, but he happens to try and avoid them.
He hates Icarus, and Icarus hates him. Mm-hmm. But for me, this was the one it was a strange choice. I don't bump up against it. I don't know whether it's Icarus is the actor, just his portrayal of that kind of just stoicism and kind of devout portrayal of Icarus and of a religious zealot who is, I will do whatever, even if I must be destroyed, and I will be reborn. It is our purpose, etc., etc., etc. I don't know if I bump up against that. I don't know. This is essentially the crux of it for me.
I think you're supposed to bump up against it if you hold the view that he shouldn't be devout or righteous in his devotion to the mission. So that's the point. Because that's not necessarily how... I mean, from what you're saying, that's not the choice you would make in that situation. And okay, you might be slightly biased because you're human, but
I want to survive.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't. It's just strange.
It's not, because Devotion has produced that many times before, across countless, whether it's religious concepts or whether it's non-religious concepts, or there has been that devotion to people that have actually made them go seemingly against logic, but it's in their own logic and their own rational framework that they do this. And I think that's what's simply happened with Icarus. And actually he's made that choice a long time ago because he decided to separate from Cersei, who could have been the only one that would have or could have possibly changed his mind on that. And if they had stayed together over the course of that 600 odd years after the fall of the Aztec Empire. So I think that's the whole point. You're supposed to butt up against Icarus if you're not aligned with what he's doing. But again, I think it goes, it's to the point of about, I guess, devotion to a cause and righteousness rather than whether it's good or evil. I mean, it can be that as well, depending on the type of righteousness. And I just think the modification of Icarus is Kingo, where he says, I agree with him, look at the countless billions that we're preventing from coming into being through the creation of new galaxies, with the power being that will be created through the awakening and the creation of Tiamat. But at the same time, I don't want to fight my, brothers and sisters of the Eternals, and he's kind of the moderate in that sense. So I think what's good about it is it gives that full spectrum, ultimately.
Exactly.
At different stages of their time on Earth as well. I think Druig, that realization of wanting to interfere more with is the same idea. And now here Cersei is wanting to absolutely interfere with the mission, which is to stop the awakening of a Celestial.
And it's also the fact that what Druig learns is the reason why they're not allowed to interfere is because if you have war and humans die in war, you will have a baby boom afterwards, which will feed into the plan of filling up the planet with more humans. Whereas he's kind of going, but I could save them from dying. I could save them from battling each other and killing each other. Why can't I interfere? And they're going, oh, well, don't tell him the reason why he can't. It's just, they tell him it's about development of the human race, but actually it's about feeding the power that will raise the Celestial. So the true villain of the whole movie is the person that we see probably least, but just hear about it, is Arishem, because he is a person that has a vocal connection to the Eternals on Earth and is telling them this is coming. Be prepared for the death of the entire planet and the Celestial to rise. Icarus has that kind of disconnect from the world, probably because he separated himself so much. He realizes they've done this to various planets before. So what's another planet? He'll just sit there and wait until the moment presents itself. Arishem is their god. Arishem tells him to do it. He will become the right hand of their god Arishem and allow the Celestial to rise and the death of the planet. So it's not new for him. He's just gone, okay, well now I know what our mission is here. That is the mission that we've been sent here to accomplish effectively. But so the rest of them, other than Kingo's a little bit in between both sides, the rest of them are on the side of protecting the humans like they have done for 7,000 years. A really interesting idea. Again, it's not like the Avengers going up in a battle to punch things in the face to prevent the humans in the immediate vicinity of surviving. It's got that real complexity to it of an argument for and against. Icarus's argument is simply, I've done this many times before. I've just had my mind wiped afterwards. So why does this particular planet matter more than the others did?
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting story for a Marvel movie to go down, isn't it?
It's different. It's really different.
I think that's the thing.
And that's the challenge, I think, that is potentially there for the audience. And I I guess ultimately it comes down to your sensibilities in some respect. But I think it's a really quite successful actually in how it does it. And I think this final battle to stop the rise of the Celestial, it is really good. I mean, I like that we see Phastos getting in and using his tech to effectively restrict Icarus. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
We really see, that great moment for Makkari where she's creating the dust storm from the beach around Icarus, and then Crow as well. But also you see
Athena versus Crow is a great battle too, where Athena's beating down on him. He's trying to use the knowledge that he's gained from absorbing Gilgamesh as well. He's trying to use the words that Gilgamesh said. But I love that Athena's still able to keep her composure and take him out. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really good. And then we see Cersei sort of that moment where she created I guess, are Celestials organic? Because they don't look it, do they? And like Aramesh does look like a massive hunk of like some kind of rock, but they are sentient. They are organic in that sense.
Yes. If you think Nowhere, which is in Guardians of the Galaxy, is the head of a dead Celestial, and they mine the organic
brain
of the Celestial for stuff.
Right. And so she uses her hands to effectively do a massive celestial popsicle. And I thought the awakening of it was very cool. I loved the imagery of the fingers coming out the ocean, and the head starting to rise, and that sort of that yellow gold of Tiamat. I just think that's really awesome. And it's to think I really want a future MCU movie to kind of reference the fact that there is this like new formation coming out of the Indian Ocean. So, I thought that was pretty awesome, to be honest.
Very cool.
I think they're going to have to. I think it's going to have to be talked about at some point. It's just like, by the way, we've now got this massive thing.
I mean, I love the idea, like, really towards the end. I think there was some CGI seagulls or seabirds sort of, like, going around the cliffs of the fingers. And basically the amount of bird poop that's going to be on Tiamat's fingers when, I guess, if he does awaken in some way that doesn't kill Earth is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
No, I don't think so either by how they've said it, but...
Yeah, but the humans do have a few other things to worry about. This is just the rise of something new in the ocean that they may not be able to know exactly what it is unless they see it with their own eyes or a little bit of investigations done. Whereas in our final point, the aftermath, the end of the movie, we do have Arishem themselves arriving over planet Earth, which can be seen from planet Earth.
Yeah.
Picking up 3 of the Eternals, picking up Kingo, Cersei, and Phastos, taking them from their homes and dragging them out into space. Like, that's going to be on the news for a few weeks at the very least, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Half the world sees this.
Yeah,
it's over London.
but also I presume over the US with Phastos being taken up and Kingo. We don't know where he went with Sprite. I presume he was on the way back to India, or was he taking care of Sprite, or was Sprite going to boarding school?
Sprite's going to boarding school.
Yeah,
she's now a true human. I wasn't sure whether she was going to be staying with Kingo while going to boarding school, or he was just dropping her off and then heading back to India. I suppose she's 6,000 years old, so she doesn't actually need a guardian, but she may
doesn't actually need education, but it's good for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Sprite will be back in some form because Sprite is the only eternal, non-eternal, ex-eternal left who is able to basically talk to people and tell them what happened.
Yeah.
So Dane Whitmore will be able to find Sprite and kind of talk to other people.
And I know this is a terrible thing to have in mind when you're watching a Marvel movie, but I was there the whole movie going, this was filmed in 2018, 2019, I think, and then finished. A bit of extra filming was done in 2020 just because of lockdowns and how the shutdown happened. And I was looking at the actress who played Sprite going, they better do something in this movie to release her for being an eternal teenager, because she's a very young actress playing this role. And if they don't do something in the storyline to sort this out, when they come back to film with her, even for her cameo scene, she's going to look 25 and it will not work. So they clearly had to do something in here. And it makes sense for the character arc of this character that spent thousands of years as a teenager. It makes sense to release her from that and
definitely
and move it along to allow her to grow. But now she has no powers. That's the big difference. She's no longer a powered Eternal.
Yeah.
No, she is essentially being turned from an inorganic to unorganic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have, when Arishem is, I guess, has them in judgment, for, I guess, them going against, Mission. It's interesting because I think the original comics have that Celestials make a judgment on planets as to whether they're worthy to exist effectively. And that is ultimately where it comes back to, which is instead of the exploding planets with the awakening and birth of the Celestials from them using all that energy, it's that Arishem is, well, I will leave them and I'll come back to pronounce judgment on the human race. At some future date. So, that threat, in terms of it, the judgment of Arishem hasn't gone. It's there for the planet. And
he's going to use the memories of the Eternals. Again, the comic book version is the judgment is based on the memories of the Eternals, the information they're feeding back. And there's no specific, timeline given for when the end of the planet that the Eternals are on, will come. But it's just fed back, and eventually a judgment will be made by a Celestial as to whether that planet should survive or not. So that's kind of the threat of being an Eternal and getting too close to humans. I suppose this could happen any day. Depending on what we're feeding back to our celestial god, let's say, of Arishem, he may just decide, well, actually, this planet doesn't deserve to exist, and kill it.
Yes, they call it the hosts. The first host, second host, third host. Is when they come to judge, and it's essentially yay, nay, or continue the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's from the comic books. Yeah.
Anything else about where we have left everybody else? We've got, as we said, three of the Eternals being dragged out into space by Arishem. We've got Icarus sending himself into the sun, kind of fulfilling the story that was created for him by Sprite back in mythology, that he is the being that flew too close to the sun. Does that mean the last time we're going to see Icarus?
Don't know. Does he die? He doesn't technically have wings. And he is, but he may survive that, I guess. I mean, it's almost like an act of self-immolation, isn't it? Really, that he does this.
I feel like he survived, but he is the only Eternal that can fly, isn't he? That's what he says is the kind of his special benefit. He can fly, basically. So, flying himself towards the sun is where we kind of leave him, right? We don't see him burning up or exploding or being beheaded. So, I think we may see Icarus back.
If you don't see the body, he's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially, or he may not be dead.
Yeah. And then my favorite kind of, I'm going to say, joke to the audience that may not have enjoyed watching 10 brand new characters being introduced in the movie The Eternals. We have Makari, Droog, and Thena going out into space to find all of the other, potentially thousands of Eternals that are in the universe on other planets and waking them up. So these are not the only Eternals in the galaxy. And I love that little kind of, I think that's a little poke at people that may have thought there's too many characters in this movie. Well, guess what? We could have had 1,000 more characters in this movie if we'd wanted to.
There is so many more that they haven't brought in. And they're good ones as well. Like, but yeah, like this for me was fun because I thought I'm down for a Druig, Makari, and Thena spin-off.
Absolutely.
I was like, that's a Disney Plus show I'm happy to watch.
Yeah. I'd rather see a movie of it rather than
true.
Show. But yeah, I could see them. That is the next time we'll see them is most likely going to be these three characters and one more person, which we'll talk about in our Easter eggs and notes. Anybody else have anything else about the main movie before we go into Easter eggs and notes?
No, I think I've covered most of mine.
Yeah, no, nothing really from me. I think it was an interesting wrap.
Excellent. Shall we go into some Easter eggs and notes then?
Sure.
One thing we didn't mention throughout the movie, and we mentioned there's been a few firsts in this movie, but first sex scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Since
Although it's been implied multiple times with Captain America and Peggy Carter and their dancing.
That's not the same thing, though, Chris. It's been implied that Captain America has been a virgin up until he meets Peggy Carter and they have a dance back in the 50s.
That's hilarious.
This is an actual sex scene that's on screen in a movie. And I must say, being in the cinema and seeing the PG standard coming up at the start of a Marvel movie, seeing that coming up at the start and then seeing the sex scene in here, I was going, well, they probably should have made sure that people were aware that this isn't your standard movie. This will go into more adult themes. I was quite surprised that it did have the kind of sex scene we would have seen in the Netflix shows, for example.
Yeah, it's kind of sex scene from the shoulders up, exactly. I guess. Yeah,
and it's more that Icarus chooses mid-sex to say he loves her, which is definitely a choice.
Is that like Midgard?
It is. It's more. It's
a new
like
realm.
Asgard.
It's a new Thor realm, mid-sex.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of mid, let's go to the mid-credit scene then, since there's nothing else to say about the sex scene. Our mid-credit scene, Patton Oswalt and his his sixth Marvel Universe role after playing 4 brothers on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Also MODOK on the TV show MODOK, and now playing Pip the Drunken Troll. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He announces the arrival of Thanos' brother, Eros, played by Harry Styles.
Yep.
Yes.
We did already say this to Chris, so this is not news to him, but we were completely spoiled about this reveal by a news station we were listening to 2.5 weeks before the movie came out, where they had in their entertainment section, guess who's joined the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Harry Styles plays Eros, the brother of Thanos. And it was dealt with in the same way as look who's dating who in this entertainment story. It was one of those ones where you're going, why are you telling us the mid-credit scene for a movie that is coming out in 2.5 weeks' time? Why do I need to know this on a standard radio entertainment hour section? I'd rather have waited to see it when it comes up. But quite interesting to see this actor, Harry Styles, in the movie. I know he's only really done one big movie before, which was Dunkirk, with Barry Keoghan, who plays Droog in this movie. I wonder if Barry Keoghan put in a little word for him with Chloe Zhao. He's free. Why can't he come in? Oh, great. That will definitely get people in for the next movie. But again, really interesting having Harry Styles playing the brother of CGI character Thanos.
Yeah. So Thanos is an Eternal.
That's right.
Just getting that out there.
Yeah.
He's an Eternal with the deviant gene. Mm-hmm. Essentially, that's how they used to describe him. He's a bit off left of center.
Yeah.
I.e. the purpleness and the chin and all that jazz.
And Eros was specifically created to be an attractive brother of Thanos. That was the creation. So I kind of like the idea of picking someone like Harry Styles, who's known to be very attractive. But he also has a different type of deviant gene, let's say. He likes a lot of fun, outside of the, standard pursuits, let's say. He likes deviant. He likes being deviant.
Yes. Yeah.
It's an interesting choice because this is so the film does end with the Eternals will return. And then we get the credits and we get these 2 credit scenes. So with then this and the choice, this is the only thing that I was like, oh my God, because part of me does wonder if we are going to get how much more Eternals we are going to get throughout the films, or through the next couple, because there's a couple of untitled Marvel projects and I'm like, is one of them Eternals 2? Is it the Eternals in space? It's like, Eternals in space, kind of that type of thing.
I can kind of see some of them turning up in the next Thor movie, or the next Guardians of the Galaxy movie. They're both in space, so I can kind of see that happening. I don't think you need an Eternals as a movie covering the span of 6,500 years or 7,000 years. That wouldn't work again. So we wouldn't be able to tell another Eternal story. You would have to really ground it and have it over the course of a week or something. And I don't think that would work for this group of characters. It'd be great to see these characters seeded out around the Marvel Universe and this being their intro.
I guess now that Harry Styles is Eros, given how big he is right now, then I suspect we will be getting something where there's a lot of Eternals, whether it's Eternal 2, who knows, but it will be a lot of Eternals and I guess other stuff.
Well, the great thing about him being Eros, if we are going to get more Eternals, he's with Makari, Droog, and Thena. So hopefully that means we're going to see the three of them again in a Marvel movie.
So this was my thing. I was like, okay, the introduction of Harry Styles does kind of suggest to me that there is going to be something more. And with those three characters and what they're potentially going to do, I'm like, okay, this is where you're going to go with it. Like, this is potentially an interesting take. And it kind of was like, okay, well, look, the Eternals, we can't, as you said, you can't do 6,000 years again of story. So what you can do is, it's a story in space with Eros, with Druig, Makari, some flashbacks to Druig and Makari's relationships throughout the years, maybe some of that, and then Athena's flashback to some of her previous incarnations of the Mad Weary. So that's your flashbacky parts, and then it's just centered in them finding more Eternals, going to say, because you've got to save the other Eternals. That's what their job is as well. They need to go off and save Cersei and the rest of them. So it's going to be interesting. And the fact that I was like, oh, well, this is going to be a bit like, I think, like, say, like some of the cameos of the other Guardians of the Galaxy in Guardians of the Galaxy, where 2, where you had Sylvester Stallone and a few others. I was like, all right, it's a nice thing. I think that fact that it's Harry Styles, I think the fact that it's a few of the, I think this is hinting at potentially they will announce something. And I think it may be another 4 years from now. I think potentially, you're right, I think it's a film, but they could do it as a Disney Plus show. But I think that's just harder to do because it's more expensive. So I think it will be an Eternals 2. We do have Disney Plus Day coming up soon.
Yep, 12th of November.
Or Disney Day. So there is Star Wars announcements and there is Marvel announcements. And in that, there's going to be, potentially that's where they will announce a couple more films.
Absolutely. It's the day that Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is being released on Disney Plus as well. So, yes, supposed to be some upcoming announcement for some additional Marvel movies that are coming out in the next couple of years. I'm perfectly happy with Harry Styles being cast in this role. He was really good in Dunkirk in the role that he had in there. I'm interested to see him in the future. And whatever way it would be, but I do feel this was the Eternals are now introduced. Off we go now and tell stories with those characters in other Marvel movies in different ways. But I can certainly see if you wanted to do an epic Eternals 2, I think what you do is you get, exactly as you say, get them building an army of Eternals versus Arishem to release the 3 Eternals that he's taken. And that's your big core battle movie that you could go for if you're doing Eternals 2. Look, we've broken it. Send us an email, Marvel. We'll get the script together. I'm sure it'll be grand.
Yes, exactly. But let's move on to the post credit.
Well, the post credit.
Ebony Blade.
Yes, I love this. I love this one. I just thought it was just so nicely done. I love the kind of the flutter around the blade. As
the blood curse.
Yeah, the blood curse that as Dane goes towards it, and of course just the intrigue of who just said that line to him, who's that? Like, we came out of the cinema going, was that Nick Fury? I just don't know. And then Derek kind of mentioned it could be young Nick Fury or something like that. I was like, and then it was,
I was thinking like multiversal Nick
Fury,
multiversal character. The reason why Nick Fury, of course, is because that really felt like exactly the line that Nick Fury said to Tony Stark when he was introduced to the world. And I was just expecting the camera to flip around so we could see the character who is saying this speech or saying this. Or do you really think that's the right choice, Mr. Whitmore? It really felt like, wait a minute, why would you end on a black screen? Why would you not pass around to the character that's there? I must admit, and I know I could Google away or I could Wikipedia all day. Black Knight is the character I know practically nothing about. I've been reading comics for 30 years now, and I don't think Black Knight has ever appeared in anything that I've been interested enough to remember. The only time I've seen this character is in Lego Marvel Superheroes, where I played the character for a while. So as far as I'm concerned, he is a medieval character who carries a sword. I know literally nothing about him apart from that. But what was annoying was I knew that Kit Harington was playing Dane Whitmore. I knew A. Whitmore had been the Black Knight. From, again, Lego Marvel Superheroes. So I was waiting for a team up between the Black Knight and the Eternals for the entirety of the movie, and we get the post-credit scene where he looks at the blade, and then someone says something to him and it goes to black, and I'm like, oh my god, why has he not got the suit on?
Yep. I thought it was like John Walker, US agent, and it was like maybe you would have had Val there beside him or something. I thought that's where they were going. Like, this is the Dark Avengers. We're getting more and more post credits around that.
Right.
I do know Black Knight. I know a lot of his history just because I'm a nerd, I suppose.
Yeah, I know some.
He's part of the Avengers, and he's a bit more mystical and things like that. And more, he overlaps on a lot of the kind of multiversal. Some of the weird multiversal stuff that's been going on back in the day with Marvel Comics, so he was involved in a lot of that. And then obviously I loved Excalibur, the UK-based superhero team like the Avengers led by Captain Britain. He was a big part of that. So that's where I do know him from. The person who it is, the voiced, so should we just say it to who it is? It is Mahershala Ali. It is Blade.
Yeah, which is cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. I had no idea. I had to get told that by online. Yeah. I was like, I did not connect the voice, did not connect. I am very interested to see where they go.
And it fits as well. I mean, you think of, say, not Blade, but you think of the mythos of the vampire, the castle in Romania. There is that element of the medieval,
yes.
the lore to it. And so having the Black Knight connected with Blade in some way, makes an awful lot of sense. And I think this is very, very cool, actually. Yeah. It suddenly made me excited for the Black Knight. And this is a personal choice, whether Kit Harington is the one for me, I don't know. But that final post-credit scene has convinced me of it all with the Black Knight, for sure. I love the reveal of the sword. I loved it kind of wrapped in the kind of almost like bloody bandages. I love the little nod actually in the movie, after seeing that post-credit scene where she got him that ring, the Medi certainly got him the ring. And
it does, there's a couple of little moments.
It's really nice.
Really, so like the fact that when she knows that the planet is going to die, when it's effectively the apocalypse is coming, she tells Dane Whitmore to get in contact with his uncle that he's lost contact with and talk to him and resolve the issues that they've had, which is why we have the post-credit scene. It's why Whitmore is there with the sword. He's obviously reconnected with his family and learnt this history, since the last time Cersei and he spoke. So that's, I suppose, because I had that knowledge that he's playing the Black Knight, I was watching, Kit Harington the whole time as things are getting revealed to him. I'm going, when are you going to share your secret that you run out at night dressed in medieval gear, cutting down vampires, or doing whatever it is that you do with a sword in London? When are you going to reveal your secret? And it's only at the end that he's found out what the secret is and is about to take that journey at the end of the movie.
You could almost sense that Loki moment where there's the reenactment society where I don't know, you could imagine a bigger version of that on the movie where there's some kind of medieval reenactment of a battle that Dane Whitmore gets sort of embroiled in as the real Black Knight. I think that'd be hilarious, but I guess they won't do that. I certainly won't be getting a call from the writers at Marvel.
No, I don't think any of us ever will. Before we go on to some feedback for the Eternals movie and from our wonderful fellow defenders, guys, let's see who defends the movie now that we have finished our full discussion on it. John, how about yourself? Do you defend Marvel's Eternals?
Yeah, I do defend this movie. I'd give it 4 House of Eternal out of 5. I think I just think it had I think it probably was always going to be slightly sort of uncertain for anyone who watches Marvel movies, even on the comic books. I mean, and I think it's got a really tough job to do. It's not really focusing on one person. It's a group that are hugely powerful. It is talking about, very theological themes, I guess to some extent, or philosophical themes around how worlds are created, and it coming out of the death of a planet that these Eternals have come to love and care for in the most part. It's having to say, connect back into the previous MCU movies and set up how they're going to be integrated into the next phase of the MCU. And I think it did it really well. I really loved that epic visual style of Chloe Zhao. I loved in mostly the action sequences that she did. I thought there was some great shots, particularly the one in the forest. I really like the dynamics between the Eternals. I think she really captured that quite nicely in the time she had, given everything else that was going on here. It took a few rugs from under my feet, with the Icarus betrayal. I really liked that reveal, and how it connected to his disappearance and sort of estrangement from Cersei. The Druig-Makari relationship, that whole element, and that he wasn't the bad guy in that sense. Like, I was just thinking all the way through this, and I really just liked all the different elements of this, really. But I think it was a lot to take in. I definitely feel I need to see it again. I mean, I came out liking it, but it was like, I need to see it again, to be honest. And I think our discussion here has made me sort of like it a bit more than I probably did coming out of the movie, to be honest. But I still think I need to sit down and look at this again, because it's massive. It's epic. It really is huge. It's cramming, I guess, Endgame into one movie, ultimately, without any sort of build up to it, with no real central character to speak of. Yes, Cersei, but an ensemble mix. It's the Eternals that are the central character. So I thought this was done really well, and I loved the post-credit scene with the Black Knight hint, and certainly once sort of figured out whose voice that was being Blade. Great. So yeah, I defend this movie. I really liked it, and I'd give it 4 House of Eternal, to give a Game of Thrones reference, out of 5.
Excellent. How about yourself, Chris? How are you feeling about the Eternal? Do you defend Marvel's Eternals?
Oh, I do defend it. As I said, it's good. It's not great, amazing. Having talked more about it throughout the discussions, now I am more upbeat on it, having discussed it all with you. I think it's brought to light a few things. I still think there's some choices made that I just personally wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have broken the story like this. I would have used potentially some of the others. But I think, again, in the MCU, I trust. They have a story they want to tell us, so I'm going to go their way and read it their way and watch it their way. They have choices, and I will follow them. I love the actors. I love the overall, some of the choices and I think it sounds like a terrible thing, but the representation is a huge thing for me. Just seeing this on screen and not played out as big fanfare just was fantastic.
Absolutely. Yep.
And some of just these some of the smaller choices, like Barry Keoghan having an Irish accent, a very Irish accent, having Salma Hayek have that Mexican accent, having Kingo have his kind of Indian accent. Like, all these choices were just great, and they're small, but they add to the film. It was epic. It was Marvel. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. On the accents, it kind of struck me after watching the movie. I was like, okay, these are Eternals. They're coming to our planet 5000 BC, and they all have these different accents, and they're allowed to use them because it's fine. We don't know what space aliens sound like, but I kind of love the idea that potentially, we don't know exactly where Salma Hayek's farm is, where Ajax's farm is. Would she possibly have lived in the area near Mexico? And that's why Mexican people have a very similar accent to her. Did Icarus go to Scotland, and that's why Scottish people have a Scottish accent? I was just kind of working it out that all of these people are from a different planet. we're here thousands of years, and maybe they're the ones that developed the accents that we all have in different corners of the world, because they all moved to different corners of the world. It's a great little Marvel no prize for why they have their accents as they do. There you go.
No, it was fun. But that's my view. Derek, what about yourself? Do you defend the Eternals?
I absolutely do now. Must admit, I just couldn't form an opinion straight off the bat coming out of the cinema. You know, there's times when, you know, I produce the show and I decide when we record, and I call out to the guys to make sure we've seen a movie and then go and record as soon as possible. And I'm really glad we didn't record immediately afterwards, because I couldn't have formed my thoughts that quickly after this movie. There was so much going on and so much crammed into its runtime, even though the runtime is long. But I love what they did put in there, and I love what they delivered with the film overall. And now thinking back on everything and formulating the story as it was presented, which you would usually do after seeing it 2 or 3 times, you're able to pull together all the pieces. But I think having the podcast and chatting with you guys about it and kind of putting it all together as is has made me appreciate it even more. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it again. I'm really glad we got to see it on a massive big screen, because there are some majorly epic moments. There's only just 2 particular things that I felt watching the movie that I didn't really get when I watched first time. One was, it seemed like the editing was allowing a second or 2 after each actor spoke their lines, which made things feel a little bit disconnected when people were talking to each other.
Okay,
I think maybe that, we had a bit of a chat about it before, and I think maybe that was because they were trying to create that kind of epic feel of a stage play or of a big Shakespearean type performance, but sometimes it just felt unnatural and it didn't seem to fit with big moments like one of Richard Madden's speeches where he's revealing his beliefs, and it felt like everything was just being done on a sound stage with nobody around. So I don't know too much about filmmaking other than the general, but it felt like maybe it was just in the editing that things were being allowed to sit for a little bit too long and make them feel disconnected. Maybe it was just a choice.
They were like Treebeard. Their time perception is so different that they have a sentence over many years.
Maybe that's it. And then the other thing, and this isn't really a complaint, this is just a bit of a joke. I absolutely have been watching too much Great British Bake Off with John, because it felt like the powers that all of the Eternals were using was like that gorgeous sugar work they put on top of all the cakes and the kind of caramel sugar work that they do. So I was watching that the whole time going, I really want a cake. So there you go. But overall, yes, really enjoyed it. It's somewhere in the middle for me. It's definitely above all the comedy Marvel movies, your Ant-Mans and your Guardians of the Galaxy and Thors and all those movies. It's way up above there. It's probably closer to the top 15, top 10 Marvel movies. So that's good after one watch. I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
I think that's my thing. I as soon as this comes out on Disney Plus, I will be giving it another rewatch in 45 days?
Yeah, something
like that. Yeah, it's going to be coming before Christmas. Definitely. Yeah. I think it's around the same time as Spider-Man, or the week after Spider-Man comes out in cinemas. So we'll be able to see it again, just like we'll be seeing Shang-Chi next week. Let's get on to some feedback from some of our fellow defenders. First up on email to feedback@tvpodcastindustries, we have an email from 084 who says, I'm having a hard time finding a character or storyline that I didn't care about here. And I'd like to just be happy about this movie that I loved without being too anti-negativity in the community. It's just difficult not to be worried that Marvel and Disney are going to respond to all of the critiques with course correcting that removes things I loved about this first one. Unfortunately, that forces me to care about what other people's opinions on the movie, and that's a difficult spot to be in. All in all, I got to watch a well-crafted, complex story about the beauty of humanity from an outside point of view. I got to see a protagonist who leads this journey not because of her physical abilities, which are also great, but because of her love for humanity. I saw a villain hating himself for betraying people he loved, but unable to waver from his beliefs. I saw a dozen different characters go through beautiful arcs that resonated with the theme of the movie. And yes, there are too many of those arcs to list without writing one of those long-winded emails I used to write to you guys. But having a lot of characters is not an inherently bad thing in a story. I've seen terrible movies with only a few main characters, and I've seen breathtaking ones with too many to count. What matters is whether it's clear the creators care about what they're presenting to us, and to me, it's clear in spades that Chloe and the other writers care very much. I just hope that they'll be allowed to bring us more. In that regard, I guess I'm at the mercy of the loudest opinions. Until next time, 084. Thanks, 084, for your thoughts. Really interesting to hear that, isn't it? Because for me, you go and watch a movie and you find out what you think about it personally, but this one once again, we had that thing that comes out beforehand, which is, this is what the critics are thinking of the movie that you're going to watch next week. Aren't they really negative? This is the worst reviewed movie of all time in Marvel history. From the 6 reviews that we've got on a Rotten Tomatoes aggregator, which takes no account of what the actual writing was in those reviews. It just takes account of a score and rolls it up into some kind of average, as to what it stands for. Really difficult with these kinds of movies to go in there and just form your own opinion about about what you think of it, because you're being told you shouldn't like this because this calculation says you shouldn't like it. Well, that's not how I've ever watched movies in my entire life. But you do feel the pressure of it afterwards. Did I like this? Because everybody apparently didn't like this.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's the inherent go-to now that everything has to be reviewed. And I mean, I do it, I do it for that reason of out of 5. But in many respects, I guess my out of 5s are more of a guide, a personal guide. Yeah, exactly. But it's, I guess that metric just can be detrimental, or it can be really good. I think 084 has encapsulated a lot of what I think about this, and thank you so much for that. I think what you're saying about Icarus, the villain hating himself for betraying the people that actually he did love, but it was his beliefs. It was that righteousness that's stuck in the way, and it's the diversity of different types of story that can be done. And I agree. I think Chloe Zhao and the other writers and other creators here of this story, of this production, I think they've done something really, really interesting and really, really different. And Marvel movies should have this difference. We expect it in comics, and we expect it in guess the different stories we see anyway, and how they're told. It really helps sort of bring new ways of looking at things. So, thanks, 084.
Yes, thank you, 084. It's interesting. I do think there is an element of the vocal minority here, in that, like, what we have seen is that as of kind of a Saturday, as reported by Variety and Deadline and stuff, the Eternals had already made $70 million, which is kind of, it's the 5th best opening film of the year. Shang-Chi was 75.3, Venom was 90 million, Marvel's the Black Widow was 80, and Fast Saga was 70. So it still has another 24 hours, the Sunday, to make more and go above, because it's Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are the opening box office. And it will basically, it's still one of the biggest. So I think I think Marvel are becoming and starting to understand that they don't need to swerve and twist as much as, and pander as much as, to the audience. And they are very much, if that was the case, we would have got Mephisto like 8 times by now in Disney Plus.
Well, yeah, but there is always that complaint, isn't there, or that kind of attack on a studio like Marvel that's getting successful. It's like, why don't you support underground filmmakers or small films? Why don't you put that money that you're earning in the box office into other types of cinema? And really, with the Eternals, I think this is an example of where they have. They've backed a director who's come from independent cinema, who's won an Oscar for her movie Nomadland, but she was brought on board for this movie before an Oscar win.
Yeah.
And she's supported by them and allowed to put her vision into their studio. They are telling stories that are trying to reach a very wide audience, and they have a platform there being able to do that. And because they're reaching out to other filmmakers to put their stamps on Marvel movies, with the precursor that there is a kind of a way you have to deal with something that's going to be in the MCU. But I think that's their way of doing it, isn't it? That's their way of supporting these other movie makers. Like, I am certain everybody who's made a Marvel film, if it's been successful and then gone off to make their own movie, has found a member of their audience interested to see what they're doing because they've done other movies in the Marvel universe. I know the Russo brothers have now set up their own studio making movies because of their work in Marvel. It's not because of their work on Community beforehand. It's because of the movies that they made at Marvel, and people are willing to check out the movies they've done because of their time spent at Marvel. So it's kind of like they're taking people and giving them the ability to make their own future choices, which will be of interest now to future audiences. So I'm glad that they're doing that, and I'm really hopeful. I know it's easy to be negative 084 when there is a beautiful film like this that's doing things that Marvel, that big budget movies, let's say, haven't done very often in the past. It's easy to be negative that they will take criticism and go, right, we're not doing that in the future. But remember what Marvel had done with criticism before. They've actually turned it to their advantage and gone, actually, we meant to do that in the movie, and you'll go out and watch Thor: The Dark World 5 more times because it's essential to watching our biggest movie of all time. They're good at taking criticism and turning it into, no, that's what we meant the whole time. So I don't think they're going to change things. I don't think they're going to pull it out of the universe. This movie exists. It's out there, and I'm delighted for it.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, 084. We also got some feedback over on Facebook. Facebook.com/groups/TV podcast industry. First up, we had Sandy Resendez, who said, I saw it last night and sad to say I didn't like it. I found myself not caring about any of it. I think I'm just having a hard time getting on board with the next MCU phases after the climax of Endgames. I almost think this may have been better as a Disney Plus series. I checked my watch a few times and that is telling for me. Thanks, Andy. I've seen a few people say this. Both two parts. Both the I'm having difficulty getting into the new MCU phase and other people saying that the Eternals would have been even better as a Disney Plus. On the Disney Plus, I think it's an interesting thought because then you could have had like a 6-hour epic almost where it could have been completely time spanning, where you would have had a whole, the whole first episode hour would have been the Babylonian, and then you would have had different, like, you could have seen Cersei and Icarus across the ages in Victorian England, in the Renaissance, blah, 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 like all these. And I've seen a few people say that, and I think it's an interesting idea. And that's where I do like the idea of these larger, when you can, using Disney Plus to tell these longer stories, longer form stories. Mm-hmm. On the difficulty getting onto the MCU next phase, I just give it time. Not every film's going to be perfect for you, and not every film's going to be interesting for you. They're having to introduce brand new themes, brand new characters, and yeah, not every film's going to be what you want. But just wait, like maybe the next one, maybe Spider-Man is going to be the next one that really sinks you into this next phase. Maybe the Hawkeye series is going to bring you in. Maybe it's going to be Blade. Maybe it's Thor: Love and Thunder. Wait and see.
I certainly would agree with Sandy, though, that this phase 4 of Marvel feels different to phase 1, 2, and 3. If you look at it from Iron Man 1 to Endgame, that's a very definite story. And I know Iron Man fans will say it's the story of Tony Stark. For 24 odd movies, that's basically his arc, is the whole 24 movies, whether he appeared in them or not. And then now we have a new phase introducing new people, and it does feel different, and it should. Like, you know, I think a lot of general film fans, if you tell them where phase 2 of the Marvel universe started and where phase 3 started, I don't think they'd be able to tell.
Yeah.
Whereas I think now you can.
Yeah.
Except, I will say, for Black Widow,
yes,
which doesn't feel like part of phase 4. It feels like just because of the day it was released, it's part of phase 4.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's more the post-credit that ultimately goes into phase 4.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think, to be honest, with the MCU phases, you know, MCU have developed and evolved, and I think, you know, between phases 1 and 2, I think there were different reasons for calling them phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. I think with phase 4, though, it's that the first 3 phases, that was the arc, and there were different elements within that. And, you know, there's a decision, isn't it? You know, if they continued as the previous 3 phases, potentially they might lose people, or certainly the reviews will get worse if it's the same old. It's now it's getting comfortable with what's going on. I mean, if after Iron Man 2 you would have said how that MCU would have developed by the end of Endgame, I'm not entirely sure I would have thought that given Iron Man 2, which I think is, very early on in the run, and I didn't much care for it. I mean, I didn't, again, it just wasn't for me. So I think we're just at that start, and I guess there's needed to be a few movies to go. But thanks, Sandy. As I think you're right. I think that there'll be very different opinions here on I was going to call them the Essentials and the Eternals. So thanks for that, Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah, Ron Leffman says, I thought it was fantastic. Some of my favorite character building in the MCU.
Interesting. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Ron, for that. David M. Champagne says, I could never wrap my head around the complexities of the Eternals in the comics. That said, the MCU altered their story enough to make the film beautiful and complex and understandable. I intentionally see the MCU films with a friend who has no comic knowledge. He loved it. Loved Thena and got anguished over the Gilgamesh story arc. He was also curious about Dane, including the post-credit. I had a few issues, mostly from a comic perspective. Visually stunning, decent story, and can see the direction it could take into the larger MCU. I'd give it a B+, better than average MCU film. This story hits all the Rotten Tomato buttons. Cast diversity, all with funny accents, LGBTQ+ acceptance, strong female characters, no character is white male American, evolution is mentioned and considered fact. Negative Rotten Tomatoes scores reflect hatred for woke MCU. The movie pissed off the right people.
Great point, David.
Yeah, great point, David. Indeed, yes. I would be more concerned if, at this stage in human evolution, to speak like an Eternal, that Rotten Tomatoes score was higher than that. It's good to know. I think that the negative zone of Rotten Tomatoes, sometimes there's quite a lot about how good and challenging the movie may be in question, for sure. And that's interesting about taking a friend along that has no comic knowledge. And that's really, really important. We can really get bogged down in the comic lore and the comic knowledge, as Chris always says, the burden of knowledge in some cases. And I guess these are living stories, and these changes, whilst within that framework of the comics and previous ones, this is Chloe's work, in collaboration with her other writers and in collaboration with people from Marvel Comics and Kevin Feige. Collaboration is the name of the game in this. And so I think it's immensely important that stories move on and do, flip the old pancake every so often. So, great stuff. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, David. I know what you mean. Look, they amalgamated the Neil Gaiman run. They took stuff from Earth X about the Celestials, which was like Alex Ross and stuff. I bumped up to. We actually had a discussion even before we started recording about some of this. Would I like to see a Dreaming Celestial? Yes, I would have. But that is the Golden Celestial, and which is the Neil Gaiman run, the Dreaming Celestial, which I think would have been an interesting take an arc, but it's something different. But thank you, David. Sorry.
It's interesting. Yeah, it is really interesting, isn't it, David? Given I have read most of the Eternals runs, I also feel like a brand new reader of comic books going into these movies, because so many things are different in the movies than they were in the comic books as well. So I totally get you, David. Thanks very much for your feedback.
Yes, thank you, David. Finally, the last piece of feedback comes from Joe Steimel, who says, I didn't hate any of the movie, but I didn't love a lot of it. I was drawn in immediately, but beaten down by the runtime, and that's a first in the MCU for me. The voice at the very end was enough to kick my hype levels back up, though.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think all of us who watched Luke Cage and loved Mahershala Ali's performance in there, and spoilers, the character doesn't last past 6 episodes of that show. We were all kind of hoping that work out some way to get him back in the MCU, and hearing his voice in here in the Eternals is like, oh, great, okay, they have found a way. He's coming back. feedback in the future. Thanks so much to everybody that's been sending us in the feedback for Eternals. Hopefully you'll have the opportunity to send us in some more feedback in the future to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can subscribe to the podcast at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you'll get access to all of our future podcasts. We've got lots coming up over the next couple of weeks, actually. Next week, we'll be back with our chat about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which comes out on Disney Plus from the 12th of November. Then on the 19th of November, we'll begin our coverage of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, a 10-episode series, with the first 3 episodes being released on the 19th of November. Following that, the following week, on the 25th of November, we'll be back in the MCU here with Hawkeye. First 2 episodes of that show being released on the 25th of November, with 4 more episodes to follow before Christmas. So lots and lots being covered just in the month of November. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get access to all that.
Yes. And if you want to support us, head on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries, because poor Derek's little fingers are going to be clicking a lot and we need to keep him caffeinated. So you can support by going to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries or heading to buymeacoffee.com/tvpi, where it keeps him caffeinated, or Patreon keeps the hamsters running in the wheel and the servers going, because it's a lot of content, you know. That's just 4 weeks and that's a lot of content.
It really is.
So support.
Yes, you should see the dilation of those hamsters' little pupils when you inject them with caffeine.
I know, it's so fun to watch.
But thanks so much to all of you who've been supporting us through Patreon or through Buy Me a Coffee, or through sharing our podcast on Twitter and Facebook and wherever you've been sharing it. And of course, to all of those that have been sending us in emails to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or go into our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. We love hearing from you, and we love all of your support in whatever way you do.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to speaking to you as early as next week.
Indeed. Yes. Thanks so much, fellow defenders, for joining us for our discussion of the Eternals. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending. Bye.
Bye.